Let me take you back to 2011, a time when difficulty in video games apparently didn't exist, and Miyazaki had just blessed us with the very concept and ruined online discourse forever with his breakthrough title, Dark Souls. This game changed everything, no doubt, but how many of you played Dark Souls 1 on release? As the number of games in the series expands and the popularity and fanbase grows, the number of people that played this game on release dwindles in comparison to the massive success of later entries like Elden Ring. While Dark Souls 1 was my first game in the series, I did not play it on release. Over the years, it is generally accepted that while Dark Souls 1 is an awesome game, it has several flaws mainly attributed to a rushed development. What if I told you this game had so many flaws on release, they had to severely tune up several different aspects of the game to make it as enjoyable as it is today? This video will show many of the original design choices and oversights that players experienced on day one of the release of Dark Souls 1. But how did I get that authentic experience? Well, if you'd like to do this yourself, you need either an Xbox 360 or a PS3 and a disc version of the game. Make sure you delete all save data and go offline so you don't update it, and there you go, the day one version of the game. But yeah, I played the unpatched PS3 version of the game, which is very rough since the performance was really bad on release, but I chugged through it for your enjoyment and education. One last quick note before we get started is that this video will not be a one-to-one comparison of the original release versus the final patch or the remastered version. So if you'd like to see a good list of all the patches the game had, I've included a link in the description. I just chose the ones that were more interesting for the video. Oh, and for the sake of convenience, I will be referring to the Day 1 version as Original and Final Patch version as Definitive. With all that out of the way, we can begin. We start out in the asylum, and performance issues aside, we can tell that we were playing the original release just by lighting the bonfire. Several texts were changed from "You lit the bonfire," "You revived to human," "You recovered," and "You defeated," to "Bonfire lit," "Humanity restored," "Retrieval," and "Victory achieved," respectively. With broken grammar out of the way, once I'm in Firelink, a couple of changes stand out immediately. First is that the body on this well gives us only one humanity instead of 3 you'd get in the definitive version, and leveling up is kind of odd as it doesn't tell us how many souls we need for the next level, just how many we'll be spending on it. Rather odd, but I figured I'd go with my tried and true method of rushing Pinwheel first. And while the run to his arena is business as usual, I immediately noticed something huge. I summoned Leroy to help, and he seems severely underpowered compared to what he would become. So I guess they had to buff the phantoms in general. I confirmed this when I fought the Moonlight Butterfly, and Beatrice did way less damage. Interesting that they felt the need to beef up the summons later. Anyways, back to Pinwheel. We almost died, but we're able to grab the victory. Now we can get a reward of 3,000 souls! For those of you who don't know, Definitive Pinwheel gives 15,000 souls. This is a common theme for the original version of the game. I'm not kidding. The amount of souls enemies and bosses give you in this version was so bad, they had to increase the souls you get by a lot. The gargoyles usually give you 10,000 souls for your troubles. Here though, 1,500. Yeah, if you're wondering if this sounds like a slog, I can tell you it absolutely is. While the gameplay itself is still fun and enjoyable, getting the levels you need feels like an absolute chore to play, and I'm glad they made the changes they did. However, it's not all bad. In fact, we've got our first piece of equipment that was much better originally. I got the Father Mask this run. All the masks Pinwheel dropped were a bit better, which is nice. Anyway, let's get out of here using the... Oh. Yeah, it seems like something we take for granted now, but bosses don't really drop humanity or homeward bones. This quality of life improvement means we'll either have to get out of here manually or using the dark sign and losing the little amount of souls we have. Anyways, let's move on. Making my way to the Berg, I also realized something else. Enemies seem to detect you way earlier and follow you for much longer. This was something they eventually toned down a bit, but let's just say this will absolutely be relevant for later. Also, Hollows like to close this door in the original version, which is neat, I guess. After getting to Andre, we can see that they added a lot to many of the shops in the game. Andre doesn't sell arrows in this version. Some research educated me on how bare bones vendors were in this game. Even the giant blacksmith doesn't sell twinkling titanite. Man, this sounds brutal, doesn't it? Oh, and in the forest, this illusory wall didn't make any noise. I already talked about the butterfly, but we got its soul, which we'll need for later. Oh, and quick note, the health bar and music doesn't start until the butterfly floats down completely. Moving on. Now this is where the fun begins. I made my way past the Hydra and up the ladder and decided to join the Cat Covenant. After pledging my allegiance, I immediately betray the Alliance by kicking the ninja off the edge and picking up his ring. Now this ring normally replaces your roll with a sick ninja flip. In the definitive version, you still need a light equip load, meaning you replace a fast roll with the flip. However, and perhaps one of the most infamous oversights in Dark Souls 1 history, this ring only requires you to be under 50% equip load, or to have a mid-roll. Combine this with heavy armor and Havel's ring and you got, oh my dear god, an absolute unit. Needless to say, this is absolutely broken as you have speed, defense, offense, everything. This build plagued Dark Souls 1 for an entire year. Yes, this went on for an entire year unimpeded before they decided to fix it. Original Dark Souls 1 is a fickle mistress, I may say. It has some of the worst slog in the series, but also the most broken builds to ever grace the series, and we aren't even done yet. And while we're here, it appears that tail weapons are not auto-dropped in your inventory, and require you to actually pick them up. So that's cool, I guess. During my playthrough, I tried to keep as basic as a run-through as I could, and that means going through the lower Undead Berg, and after killing the Capra Demon, I make my way to the best waifu in town, and her inventory is also a bit lacking. She also doesn't sell a Purging Stone in the original release. Hopefully this doesn't come back to bite me in the ass very soon. Alright, so no hitches getting to the depths. Just trotting along, business as usual, and... oh, damn, I got cursed. You know what that means, half health, whatever. Let me go back and get my souls and... oh, no, I got cursed again. Good thing that curses don't oh. Yeah, so curses stack in the original version? Luckily for you, I did as much testing as I could, and you can only stack curse 4 times. Which means we are operating with 1/16 of the health, and... yeah, even with all this hefty armor, even the slightest breeze takes us down. I did this for fun, but let me tell you that this was anything but. I got stuck here for about an hour trying to escape, and once I did, well, wouldn't you know it, she doesn't sell that very convenient Purging Stone. So my only options were to venture down into New Londo to find Ingward, where I would be one-shot by ghosts numerous times, or trade a cracked red-eye orb with Snuggly for the cure. And I went for the easier option. Can I just say how brutal this must have been for players at the time? Imagine countering the curse mechanic. You get your HP halved, and most players probably thought that was it, and upon dying to Basilisk again, was met with a fate worse than death with 1/4 of their HP. I wonder if these unforgiving oversights earned Dark Souls the difficult reputation that everyone spouted whenever it was brought up. And to make matters worse, new players would have only been given a vague hint on where to find Ingward, and no idea where to get a Purging Stone. Yes, Oswald sells one even in the original version, but good luck telling a new player to trek back up through all those hollows with little health. And I can't imagine Snuggly was a known NPC that was listed in guides with a complete list of tradable objects. This was truly the Dark Souls of Dark Souls. Anyways, after clearing all that up, I made my way past the Gaping Dragon and into Blighttown. Yeah, you already know that the performance was terrible, especially on PS3, so on to Quelaag, and it's all the same really. We've rang both bells, so into Sins we go. Nothing interesting here, except this arrow was red for some reason. I assume the object just wasn't loaded in properly, so I'm going to chalk this one up to PS3 shenanigans and leave it at that. Everything else was the expected result, so let's move on to Anor Londo. Okay, a bit past that. There we go. Let's just go ahead and pick up the best armor we're going to get, Havel's. But we're going to need to wait a bit before we get the most out of it. Okay, so ONS time. If you're wondering why I'm using the Lightning Spear, apparently lightning damage used to be just a bit better, and I didn't have anything else, so here we are. Enjoy this small montage of me gracefully fighting the terrifying twosome. So I decided to kill Orenstein first, and alright, I got the Leo ring. Normally you have to kill Orenstein second to get this ring, so that's kinda cool that this needed to be fixed. After the fight we say hello to her. Don't worry, she's never changed, and that marks the first part of the game. The next part of the video will be more about neat little odds and ends for your entertainment. And remember, this was the released version of the game, so no DLC existed yet. Alright, so to jumpstart the second part of the game, I made my way down the Great Hollow, grabbed the Chloranthy ring, said hello to the Jumping Hydra of Ash Lake, and joined the Dragon Covenant. There just so happens to be a great exploit that got patched out later. First, we need to turn into the basic dragon form and equip the Stamina ring. Second, we need to equip the Fire Breath Stone and a soul we want to use right next to each other. Then, we need to activate the Fire Breath, flick our character back like this, and switch to the soul we want to use and hold the fire button, and we can get an absolute ton of souls this way. The Chloranthy ring is important as it allows us to do this for as long as we're holding the button down. If we didn't have it equipped, we could only do it until we ran out of stamina. So after holding the button down for 30 minutes, I think we have enough souls to beat the game with. First, let's max out our stamina. You know that video that sought to be the fastest Havel? Yeah, I'm the fastest Havel now. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I wanted to spend a moment and talk about something that I heard spread throughout the community back when the game was within a year or two of release. This seemed to be a rumor that was generally accepted for a while, that before the game was released, players would get invaded by NPCs that were impossible to kill as a way to punish those who had the game early or tried to pirate it. Look, I'm not crazy, this was an actual thing I saw discussed years ago. Anyways, if you have heard of this, let me tell you I highly doubt any of this was true. For one, if it existed, there'd be video evidence. Second, it would have been explained by any of these YouTubers. Usually, this would be brought up in lists about ways developers would troll gamers that were pirating the game or otherwise illegitimately playing the game, like before the release date. What I think was the most likely explanation was that the people reporting this were probably invaded, however, probably by other real players, and because the PvP can be, well, kinda hard, the invaders, who would have had to have been good players to be able to take advantage of this mechanic so early on, appears as unbeatable. Sorry if this came off as a weird tangent, but I just wanted to get this off my chest, especially since this was brought up when people wanted to express even further how this was a brutally difficult game, and even the pre-release was super tough. Seems like a lot of things went into giving this game the reputation as being brutally unforgiving. However, upon further investigation, a lot of the rumors were around the game flooding your world with Black Phantom NPCs, with all stats set to 99. This also seems highly unlikely. If anyone has any definitive proof, I'd love to see it. Otherwise, this myth is busted. With souls in hand, I decided to go for what would now be considered a rather odd choice. But after some upgrading of this small shield, I decided to use the Moonlight Butterfly soul to turn it into the Crystal Ring Shield. It has an interesting weapon art that shoots a magic ring, but other than that is rather unremarkable. Oh, damn, that's some good damage. Apparently this thing used to be really damn good. So yeah, Mr. Backlogs, what was so hard about this challenge anyways? Yeah, so I upgraded it, and while doing this, I came to the realization that the Undead Parish is not a bonfire you can warp to. Whether this was an oversight or a deliberate design choice they corrected later is unclear. What is clear is that, wow, this is really annoying. I'm really glad this was changed because I consider this place the second hub of Dark Souls 1. I also discovered that you can't warp to the Depths bonfire either in this version. There may be others, but I didn't bother to check every one, so back to the task at hand. I fully upgraded the shield, and I'm just going to show you some highlights real quick. So after all that, I made my way down to the demon ruins to finish up the main changes I want to discuss. The first being this Capper demon. Usually he's a bit closer, but here he's further back. Remember how I mentioned enemies have a much bigger aggro range? Yeah, it's a lot more noticeable here as an army of goats come plunging after me, and I just wanted to point out that there used to be a Capper demon chilling right here. They would later move him over here where the soul is. Moving past the demon fire sage, we take on the centipede demon, and after that inconvenience, we move on to Lost Izalith. You remember how this is the worst area in the game with nothing going on? And remember how I just mentioned the stuff about aggro range? Yeah, this is the worst it's gonna get. These dragon butts see you from so far, are really quick, and this is the first time I ever noticed they have a spin kick attack. Also, these guys are strong as hell, and the fastest Havel stands little chance against these guys. However, they don't respawn, but let me give a quick shout out to the personal hell that was this area for one reason only. As you may know, there is a bonfire here, but in the original version, there are 3 dragon butts standing in the way of where you need to go. Imagine being a new player and having to get past those things, and then fighting the worst boss in the game, which, by the way, has nothing interesting going on this time around. It was at this point I was losing steam on finding interesting things to show off, so we're going to go into a lightning round of sorts to showcase some of the changes I wasn't able to do for one reason or another. Did you know you could trade with Snuggly infinitely as long as you didn't pick up the item you were given after a trade? Just drop another item, quit the game, and load back in. You can do this as many times as you like. Ghosts, slimes, skeletons, and mosquitoes didn't give souls in the original version. Apparently the Silver Knight Straight Sword has a lightning effect that was removed? I didn't bother to get this weapon, so I'm just taking the word of Wikidot. Hey, quick post-edit update here. While I was getting footage for this part, I got a Silver Knight Straight Sword from the first knight I killed. I unfortunately didn't get any footage of that, but as you can see, it has no extra lightning damage infused with the weapon itself. I even checked to see if the Silver Knights did any lightning damage, which they don't. However, you can see that when I swing at some enemies, they show the effect as if they were hit by a lightning weapon. I'm sure this was an oversight, but I wonder if this has anything to do with why the Silver Knights in Dark Souls 3 have lightning attacks. Iron Flesh and Tranquil Walk of Peace had to be nerfed because they were too good, presumably in PvP. You'll forgive me for not being able to showcase PvP-centric changes here. The Sunlight Altar used to require 50 faith before you could join the Covenant. You would still subtract 5 levels for every player you helped defeat the area boss, but the faith requirement was eventually changed to 25, which was a good change to encourage jolly cooperation. And I'll end with my favorite thing I read on Wikidot. Online changes. You can see resonance signs. Unsuccessful on PS3. So what did we learn? Dark Souls was truly a flawed masterpiece. Jokes aside, it's kinda crazy how unbalanced this game was. Even though it's my favorite, I don't recall any of the other games having this much change to the core experience like this one did. While it did have some fun stuff going on, a lot of it was more broken than engaging, and the bad was not fun at all, really. Playing this version makes me really appreciate what we have today in Dark Souls 1, and the series as a whole. If you'd like to see more content in the future, consider subscribing. I really enjoy making these kinds of videos. I'm Mr. Metagross. Thanks for watching.